Good morning, I'm Tamara Shoemaker. I'm not super athletic. I've got no skill whatsoever with the sport of soccer. I enjoy watching it, and so every 4 years when the World Cup rolls around, which is the major soccer tournament or whatever, I make time to watch what I can of it. I haven't gotten to the point of being a super fan where I paint my face or anything else, or go around and cheering and stuff, but I really enjoy seeing it. And you never know, there's still time. I might become one of those people. So one memorable World Cup that I remember was played in South Africa. It was hosted in South Africa. It was 2010. And there was this predominant sound that accompanied every match. It was the sound of the vuvuzelas, which I guess is a kind of a cultural thing. And it was a plastic horn type of thing that when it was blown with thousands of other vuvuzelas, it's reminiscent of this massive swarm of angry bees, or maybe a stampede of raging elephants, or a football field of kids blowing kazoos, or a cross among all three of those. So the sound was really irritating to a lot of the announcers and the players and the fans. And in general, it seemed like nobody really liked it, but apparently it was the thing to do. And so the sound just kept persisting. It was annoying, but more than that, it was just kind of all pervasive. It covered over refs' whistles and players' calls, and it kind of grated on auditory nerves. And even while watching the games, your ears just sort of rang with it after a while. So when you turned off the TV, you could still hear it. Vuvuzelas can't really compare to a shofar, and but that's kind of what they're a little bit reminiscent of. And so as I read Joshua 6 this morning, it brought back that pervasive, overwhelming sound. Only when I think of a shofar, I think of Gimli from Lord of the Rings, when in the Two Towers he goes to the horn tower at Helm's Deep, and he blows this resonant, deep blast that just sort of groans from out of the fortress and vibrates the ground, and all the enemies around just kind of get blown back by this deep, deep sound. But shofars, if you're not really familiar with them, are ram's horns. They're hollowed out and fashioned into a horn that you can blow. And in Joshua 6, they were used as part of a military offensive strategy to be employed against Jericho, right? So to set the stage in chapter 6 of Joshua, it begins with, now Jericho was tightly shut up because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. So they've no doubt got their fighting men, lining the walls. And the army of Israel has now come into sight. So they're all prepped and ready for this invasion. And according to the Lord's instructions, Joshua sets up an order for his people, an order of fighting, or an order of, marching. So an armed guard marches in front, and then behind them, 7 priests carry 7 trumpets or shofars. And then comes the Levite priests with the Ark of the Covenant, which this is key because this battle is the Lord's, and the Ark symbolizes his throne. So this is going to be central to this lineup. Behind them, you got the rear guard. And then the narrative isn't really sparkling clear about where the people of Israel march. It's clear that they're there. And so maybe they walk along behind the rear guard. So we have the entire nation of Israel walking around the city, sort of in that order. Joshua chapter 6, verses 9 to 10 says of the march around the city, all this time, the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the people, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout, and then shout. So you think about the eerie silence, except for the incessant blowing of these ram's horns. It's psychological warfare, isn't it? Joshua used it to great effect here. Gideon used it in Judges chapter 7. More recently, in the American Civil War, the Confederacy was well known to employ what was known as the rebel yell, a blood-curdling, overwhelming, multi-voice scream as they advanced against Northern forces. Days 1 through 6 in the march around Jericho, this eerie silence continues. The only thing you can hear are the shofars. The Israelites march, the shofars blow, dead silence except for the pervasive, constant sound of the ram's horns. One time around the city, and they go back to their camp. I'd always thought that this seemed rather odd, and I'd always kind of wondered what the inhabitants of Jericho thought as they watched this happen. I read today in my Bible's footnotes that it actually was kind of an ancient Near Eastern practice for sieging a city, was to trek around it. So I don't know how many times they trekked around it. I don't know if it was every day or how it worked or anything, but Jericho would understand from this action of Israel marching around their city that they were in siege. So questions had to have been prevalent, had to have been running around through their minds. How long is this going to last? What to do? Should we go on the offensive? Should we stay defensive, in our nicely fortified city? How long can we remain shut up tightly against the Israelites? Turns out they didn't have to wait that long. On day 7, on the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and they marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." When the trumpets sounded, the people shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, the people gave a loud shout. The wall collapsed, so every man charged straight in, and they took the city. And it hit me just now as I was, writing this for my blog this morning. It hit me that God does it again, right? He asks his people to step out in faith before, I love it, before he delivers the victory. Shout, for the Lord has given you the city. So with those ringing shofars as background, the people open their mouths and they fill up their lungs and they shout their praises to the Lord who has given them the city. And then the walls of Jericho collapse. That was awesome. All right, so Hebrews 11:30 says, "By faith the walls of Jericho fell after the people had marched around them for 7 days." So here's a semi-embarrassing story, but I'm going to tell it anyway because it's good. Once when I was probably 9 or 10 years old, I was in my bedroom reading before I went to sleep. And my window was open. It was a hot night. We didn't have air condition. My window was open. The warm evening air was kind of blowing in. And all at once, I heard a trumpet blast. And being raised as I was, having already rather established understanding that we will all be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed, from 1 Corinthians 15:51 and 52. I was convinced at that moment that all Christians for thousands of years have been waiting for this moment that I was now experiencing. He was here. It had arrived. And I leaped to my feet. I raced to the window, forgetting momentarily that, the time constraint of eye twinkle had passed. And I watched the heavens. I was like, all right. So, and my disappointment to hear the distant cheering of a crowd at our nearby high school, which was only about a block away, where a football game was in progress, and the trumpet blast had originally come from there. So I laugh about it now, but there's something compelling and forewarning about the call of a trumpet, of a shofar. When the final trumpet blows, do I want to be fortified, shut up in my tightly closed walls against the king who is coming? Or to bring it back to Rahab, am I going to open up my heart and my faith and welcome the king with a shout of praise when he comes, for the Lord has given me the victory? I can't wait for that trumpet blast. I'm just going to be honest. Next time, it's not going to be a football game. Hope you all have a great day. I will see you tomorrow for Joshua 7.